Sybil, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, you've done lots of work into solitude and reducing anxiety for a more fulfilled life. So, I wanted to start off with initially the effect of mobile devices and their effect on our well-being. So, what inspired you initially to write about the impact of smartphones on our happiness and well-being?
That's a good question. I mean, smartphones, this is an interesting one. We all love our smartphone. And I was doing some research to note how much we actually use it, how much we keep it on us, how we react when we don't have it with us. And it turns out that nowadays it's part of who we are. And if we don't have it, there's some anxiety or stress around where is it? We want to rely on having the phone for contacting people and for social media purposes. We want it with us all the time. So I thought that was interesting because what I'm noticing, at least as I'm talking to my clients in my psychology clinic, they're talking about their teenagers and their children really not getting on with others, not wanting to interact, and really wanting just to be staying on their devices. So kind of led me to this notion of we're becoming more socially isolated. We're kind of sticking to ourselves on the phone, but we are really getting more and more disconnected with other beings. I'm saying that as a sweeping statement, and so I don't wish to do that, but I am noticing more and more young people going down this road.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of counterintuitive almost because we use the phone as a way to connect with people who I guess we may have not spoken to a while, or we're looking at our feed and we see somebody who we haven't seen in a long time and seeing what they're doing and keeping up with their lives, yet we feel more disconnected than ever. Why do you think that is, that dichotomy exists?
Yeah, well, because what we're doing on the phone, I don't think is what we were intending to have it for. When phones first came out, like I remember I had my first BlackBerry and it was just the greatest thing on earth. And when it came out, it was designed for business people to help people stay connected with their emails and to also talk to potential clients on the telephone. BlackBerry kind of went out of phase because it stayed in that mode, whereas Apple went into let's do everything on the phone. Let's listen to music and podcasts, and let's go on and check out what other people are doing on social media. So there is a reliance on checking out what other people are doing. There's a huge reliance on doing self-comparisons. Let me see what my buddies are doing. Oh, wow, they look fantastic. I don't look as good as they do. Let me keep looking at what's going on out there in the world, but not this social connection, so as to speak. And I do see teenagers who are very socially anxious. The diagnosis of social anxiety disorder has gone up. So people don't want to be with each other in person. They prefer to be on their devices. They prefer to text. My own adult children prefer to text me rather than talk on the phone. And it's for someone who didn't grow up with that, I do find it quite disconcerting, but I think they feel more comfortable. That's what I mean about being disconnected with people face to face.
Do you think that there is therefore very much more obvious psychological and physical health effects associated with this constant need and desire for digital connectivity rather than in-person connectivity?
A lot of the contemporary research is really pointing to mental health issues like depressed affect, anxiety on account of being super connected to our devices and relying on social media as a way to gather information. So yes, we do gather a lot of information. Devices are helpful. We're in an information, boost. We can learn so much. But the downfall is that we do start to experience more mental health issues for sure. In my new self-help book, Alone Time, where I ask people to embrace some solitude, I ask them to do that for health and well-being. I ask people to do that so they can self-reflect, can think about what their goals are, their needs, be more introspective. I ask people to literally put the phone away or at least out of arm's reach while they're reading my book, because there is that tendency to want to multitask. Let me read and see what's going on, but let me also pay attention to seeing if I got a ping. And multitasking is known to not be helpful. Our brains are not equipped to be able to learn readily doing that. We can only attend to one thing at a time. So my book really, the beginning chapters are really about, hey, you need to put it down and you need to take the time to do that and feel relaxed to do that. Don't get so stressed out about not having your phone on your body at all times.
So with that correlation between the mental health issues and anxiety and this increased device usage, what are the mechanisms behind that, do you think, that cause those two to be linked?
What causes them to be linked? Well, I think there's multiple factors. I'm going to give you an example of one that a lot of research has been exploring, and I think it's fascinating. It was really quite informative for me as well. When you're reading a newspaper, or you're looking at a magazine that's at a doctor's office and you're just kind of reading through an article, you get to the end and you note that there is an end. It either says the end or there's a little icon that tells you you're finished reading. So you're getting information and you're getting a pause. You're allowed to assimilate that information, put it all together, and then disengage your attention, shift it, and re-engage into something new. But the way it works with your device is you have constant scrolling that happens. And advertisers do this willingly and happily, deliberately, because they want you to continue to do that so that you can continue to get their advertising feed. But by you continuously going through scrolling like this, you're never actually taking a break. So you're never actually taking information and synthesizing and solidifying and thinking it through and then changing your viewpoint and looking at something else. You're constantly going over the same thing. So you're perseverating, and it's addictive. It activates reward centers in the brain. It's very addictive. We keep doing it and keep doing it. It keeps us hooked. Unfortunately, 4 or 5 hours can go by and we can stay hooked. I'm guilty of it myself. So if I have trouble sleeping at night and I pull out my phone and I just want to kind of go through some feeds just for fun, just for some news, I'll keep going. Actually, we'll get less tired over time. Now, if I had pulled out a novel and started reading, I probably would have fallen asleep a lot faster just because of the start and stop points.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also, and the problem is that not only are you looking at infinite amount of content potentially with that endless scroll mechanism, there's also just the fact that a lot of the videos are so short and then there's such a big jump and difference in between each video. You probably aren't retaining anything. Like I saw a post on my Instagram when I was scrolling through the endless reels, and it was, I think the whole point of the page was like to help people stop scrolling that much. And the reel was essentially like, how long have you been scrolling and how many of the reels do you actually remember what was in them? And I was just sat there thinking, God, I remember maybe one, and I've scrolled through about maybe 50. And at that point I realized like that's actually quite concerning that I actually haven't retained any of that at all.
Absolutely. There, people are trying to get around that. IT people are working on adding apps to your phone where you can record how much time you're actually on the device in one moment in time so that you can actually keep track of it. If you're the kind of person who wants to spend less time on it, it's a really great feature to do. And I don't have any names on hand, but I do know that those kinds of apps are either in the works or that you may be able to get them now just so as to help you along.
Yeah, I would recommend, this isn't a plug or anything, I don't get paid for this, but I use an app called Opal. It's quite useful, and that has basically, it's when you open the app, it'll basically put a little motivational message over it instead, telling you to put the phone back down. Especially because I feel like a lot of the time it's almost like an instinctual response. You have like 2 seconds, like literally 30 seconds to yourself free in between something or other, and you immediately just pick up the app and open the app as if by like robotic force. Like you're not even intentionally trying to do it. It's like a automatic response to any sort of boredom. And I think that lack of inability to sit in any sort of lack of stimulation is concerning. Obviously, you looked at that as well, which is to do with the solitude that you're looking at. So why do you think it's so important that people should have the ability to actually have that solitude and not need the constant stimulation?
Yes. Well, Having constant stimulation in the form of our devices does keep us in the loop in terms of what's going on out there, no doubt about it. But the disadvantage is that sometimes the information that we're acquiring is not helpful. It's not helpful for me to self-compare and to always look up and say, wow, I'm not doing as great as other people. That's going to bring down my self-esteem. So that's one piece. Second, always kind of looking out there at what's going on means I'm spending less time within here, trying to figure out who I am and what I want and where I want to be. So it's taking away from your self-reflection. It's taking away from your ability to be introspective. And most importantly, it's taking away from your own creativity. A lot of people poo-poo the idea of boredom because nobody wants to be bored. But in fact, boredom can actually give you ideas and set up some hypotheses in your brain that allows you to think in ways that are out of the box, really kind of help you look at things in a different way. So boredom can induce creativity, but if you're constantly stimulated by everything that's out there in the world, you won't have that opportunity to be more creative and to do things for yourself on your own. So I certainly do promote some solitude. And I emphasize the some because I do contrast, strict or enforced distancing, something that we were forced to do during the pandemic, to voluntary distancing, which is what I propose, in order to do more self-reflection.
Some people might be initially a bit worried to take that level of solitude. So how do you find the balance where you can take that sort of solitude for yourself whilst also not feeling disconnected from the people you care about?
Exactly. It's definitely an important balance. And you're right. People are very nervous about taking time out for themselves. I've conducted some interactive workshops, and especially older people, when they are empty nesters, they've lost a lot of family members who've moved on, and they're very much on their own. Depression is correlated with age because as we get older, we start to lose those important contacts, the significant others in our life. And a lot of these older people are worried about having more time for themselves. So I emphasize it's not the quantity, it's the quality of the time that you have alone. If you're just alone and watching Netflix series all night, that's not really the same as what I'm talking about. I mean deliberate time to do things for yourself on your own. I'll give you an example of where I feel it's important. So a lot of my clients have anxiety. Anxiety is one of the most commonly diagnosed problems out there, and both in children and adults. And I suggest in my book strategies to combat it that involves finding personal, quiet space and taking the time to do things on your own where you're processing your inner feelings. It's scary for sure. And people often associate solitude with loneliness and being ostracized from the group, but it need not be that way. You are deliberately taking time for you, and it could be finding a private space in your home, a comfy place, devoting a couple of hours to doing things for you, journaling, meditation, whatever it is. So it's not a lot of time, but it's your time, and not feeling bad about it. And I definitely promote it for people who have significant anxiety, because I want them to be on their own so they can feel the feelings and not be afraid of them.
With that amount of solitude, obviously a lot of people are extremely busy and they feel like they might say things like, I don't have the time for that kind of thing. How can someone incorporate those moments of solitude into their daily routine, especially if they feel like they're an extremely busy person?
I would say that if you're extremely busy, then you ought to be the person who takes more time to self-reflect, because being busy in today's world, how crazy and chaotic it is. We're living in a world where things are changing in terms of our technology, computer technology in particular. And so things are moving fast and furious, and we're trying to keep up. And then we're also in a challenging world where we don't know one day if we're going to have a major health a pandemic that's going to cause everyone to be worried about their physical health, and we're trying to make changes in that direction. So we're constantly trying to keep up with the changing times. All the more reason why we need to like stop, slow down, breathe, and think about, okay, what am I doing in my day? Am I in autopilot mode for the most part of my day? Because if I am, can I take some part of that time to just say, no, it's just for me? And I would argue that in the busiest moments, you can find time. It can be as early as morning when you're making your first cup of coffee, you're going out and waiting for the sun to rise, just drinking it calmly, not doing it in front of your emails, which is multitasking, but doing it alone, finding nature, finding a way to just observe what's out there, take it in, appreciate it, stay grounded, and live in the moment.
Definitely, I feel like if you're more busy, you have arguably more reason to take that time for yourself. But if someone's in a busy household, or they have a lot of people around them who are not demanding, but kind of have expectations of the amount of time they want to be spending with a certain person, how do you set the right kind of boundaries to protect that alone time so then it doesn't get encroached into by other people, but in a way that doesn't come off as cold or harsh?
Right. I think that if you're in a busy household and you have the opportunity to have your own physical space, let's say it's your own office space or your own bedroom, that would be great. That's ideal because you can say, I'm taking some me time. And that me time need only be an hour. But as long as you are saying, for my health, this is for me. I don't think that that would be offensive to anyone. I think that all of us deserve to do that. If we don't have the opportunity to take the physical space within the home environment, we can certainly put on our running shoes and say, hey, this is my time to go for my walk. And in fact, I personally take every morning to go for a daily walk for 1 hour, maybe 1 hour and 15 minutes. More of a speed walk for me, but it started leisure and it allowed me to get out there, see what's going on in my physical world, listen to some music, get some exercise. And it has done wonders to let me think about things that maybe have been bothering me or that I'm thinking about for my day in terms of my agenda. It can be that simple. And you don't have to have physical space within the home for this.
Yeah, that is definitely an option there. In your own experience, how have you found that time and space to yourself has helped you as a person in your professional life? Has it had a big impact on your mental clarity and your health and things like that?
A lot of people had told me for many years, you have to be comfortable with yourself if you're always gravitating towards others. So especially if you're extroverted or you're a little bit anxious about being on your own, or you have anxious attachment where you want to be with your significant other, then it becomes even harder to kind of take that alone time, right? It's harder to be alone because it means potentially being lonely. And that's scary for a lot of people. And I know when I had a busy household of growing children, I desperately wanted my alone time and didn't have it. But then once I became an empty nester, then I started feeling it that, wow, I do have a lot of my alone time. So it was about balancing being lonely and deliberately wanting to take that time for me. So again, I ask people to differentiate. Being lonely means I don't want to be alone. I want to be able to connect with someone, to share my opinions, my interests, how my day was, that kind of thing. Having companionship, having that special person around. That's different. We all, we're social animals. We like that sort of thing. But it's taking that and separating that from some me time and finding a way to do that. So I did find a way to do that. As I said, starting with walking, also with reading, taking an hour of my day to do some reading for me, not for work purposes. And, just hanging around, patting my dog and, just doing things more casually and for fun. So each person has their own way of figuring out how to do that. But I think key is doing it knowing that it's not because it's not because you are going to be lonely. It's because you want to bask in the glory of just some time to reflect. You can't do that with someone else beside you.
You mentioned obviously having kids and having to have that experience and having them in the house. A lot of people these days might struggle to keep the kids entertained and keep them in the right frame of mind and end up putting an iPad or a screen in front of their kid. Do you think that might be potentially damaging to their creativity and their ability to then later in life have that ability to find solitude in themselves?
Well, I think that it has affected us over a generation. Like, I mean, when I was a kid, we didn't have these features, so we were kind of forced to, get out of the house, put on our shoes, go explore the neighborhood, find people to play with. There was a lot of exploration. There was a lot of physical face-to-face contact. And so when I was a kid, we didn't have to worry about being socially anxious. There was no such thing. You had to interact in order to learn things, in order to do things. So I would say that if parents are worried about keeping their kids entertained, maybe don't go to the iPad. Maybe reserve the iPad for when you know that you're going to be going someplace where you feel, I might be a little bit embarrassed if I'm going to a fancy restaurant and my kids are bored silly. Yeah, maybe you would want to bring the iPad if you think that you want to have a nice, relaxing dinner and not worry about the kids. But if you're at home and your kids are bored, I would argue you let them find something to do. Here's some construction paper, crayons, plasticine. I don't know what you can do with that. Go figure something out and let them figure it out. And there's lots of things that kids can do that don't involve their devices, for sure.
How can someone in that case find the balance between helping their kids develop healthy habits away from screens and in their own mind and mental clarity by themselves, whilst also giving them their own space and time to do the things that they want to do, and not too much dictating their actions and letting them make their own mistakes and things like that?
Yeah. Again, this is going to be like, there'll be individual differences in terms of people's preferences. But if your goal is to help your children manage their screen time, then you have to be a good model and manage your own screen time. So the first thing you have to figure out is, how much is the screen part of my life? How much is the device part of my being? And so the first thing that I took notice of is how much I had it on me. So it got to the point where I had my phone in my back pocket when I was doing laundry. I had it in my back pocket when I was in the kitchen preparing dinner or trying a new recipe. I had it in my back pocket when I was vacuuming. And then I thought, why? Like, why is it with me? Like, why can't it be in the other room charging? Why can't it be in the drawer? Like, why do I feel like, am I waiting for something urgent? As long as there isn't anything urgent going on in one's life, and we know that urgent matters are very rare, then there is absolutely no reason why you can't take your device and get rid of it for that time being. Or if you're enjoying an evening with a friend or a partner watching Netflix, we turn to a Saturday night, just cozying in front of the TV and watching a series. Why does that phone need to be sitting on the coffee table? Why can't it be in another room? Do you need to see who's been talking about whom? And you don't. You can just put it away. So modeling means changing how you use your device, reducing how much is part of your day-to-day existence, having it with you when there's a need, of course, but minimizing that so that you can start thinking about how your own kids are going to be using the device when they get to the age that they're ready for it. I think, the goal was let my kid have a device to be safe so they can reach out to me when there's danger. But danger does not happen that often. Urgency does not occur. So we have to be mindful of that our kids don't need the devices in the same way we don't need our devices all the time.
So if you had 3 key steps, you would say, practical steps that someone can take to reduce their screen time whilst also not feeling disconnected from social circles and things like that, what would you say are those most important points to hit?
Well, number 1 is evaluate how much time that you're actually spending with your phone, because the phone is usually what we carry it with us. It's quite convenient. So how much is it on my body? Does it need to be on my body? If I'm going to a friend's house for dinner, can I leave it in the car? Can I turn it off and leave it in my purse, but just not have it part of my existence? So if I can do that, then yes, I'm reducing it. So it's evaluating whether it's necessary, and it usually is necessary for work. So yes, it would be on my body during work, but definitely not when I'm doing other things that don't require my phone. So number one is figure out when it's important, and when it's not, put it away. I have to say that's probably the hardest step, just so you know. We all have a hard time, even charging our phones. We go check it, making sure like that we didn't get anything important. There's never anything super important, but we do check it anyway. So that's the hard step, but it is the best step. And I would say that's number one, because we have to keep it physically away from us so that we're not constantly checking it. Number two, when it is on our body because we need it, let's say for work, while we're waiting for phone calls or we're waiting for important emails, then I would say start to figure out how many times you do check it. So there is this reward center in the brain, and it gets activated. Like we get sort of a dopamine burst every time you get a ping, because the ping means something cool is happening out there. So if we keep going to the phone every time it pings, the reward center gets activated, the dopamine comes through, and we have this feeling, this really good feeling. So we want more of it. So we do it again and again. So when the device is on your body, don't make it so hard that you have to check your phone. Turn off the pings. Like I would definitely keep it on silent. If, I don't need to check it every 2 seconds, maybe I could check it every half an hour. It'll depend on, again, individual differences. It depends on what you do for work and whether you're waiting for an important call from a school, like a teacher. You have to pay attention to that too. But all in all, you can manage those things. So I would say those are the two big things to start thinking about doing if you really are serious about changing the way you use your device.
For sure. And another interesting link that you've looked at previously is between blue zones and life fulfillment. Could you quickly get into what are the blue zones and why they're significant in the study of longevity and happiness?
Yeah, I'm so fascinated by the blue zones. My partner, he has expressed an interest in understanding the blue zones, how people live within these regions around the world. As a lifelong learner, as someone who is in the retirement years, he's very motivated to want to know what does it take to have healthy aging and to live a long life. So these are specific areas around the world where researchers have noted that there is a disproportionate number of elderly persons who are living very old compared to the average elderly person around the world. They're just living to very, very high ages, like over 100 years. And why is that? How is that? What is it about their lifestyle that's making that happen? And so researchers have gone to these 7, maybe more regions now, I don't know, but have gone to these regions to discover what it is that people are doing there. And there's some commonalities. It's what they're eating, it's the diet that they have, and it's their lifestyle of exercise and how they get around. And third, it's how they interact with others. They seem to be really connected with other people physically, which means I'm sure they're not the ones using their devices all the time the way we do in North American culture and in other areas. And so basically, I think that it's a correlation. We don't know if eating certain foods is going to cause you to live to 105, but we do know that the correlation is there. So that means that there's something about healthy eating. There's something about the types of eating, plant-based eating. There's something about connecting with others, because when you connect with others on an emotional level, on a social level, and for instrumental support to get help, it makes you feel better. And so obviously that has an impact on your lifespan. So all these things matter.
One thing I wanted to focus on was how they seem to be having such strong social connections and seem to be so satisfied with their ability and to make social connections and have strong relationships with their friends and family. Why do you think these regions specifically have that ability to create those strong connections that a lot of people in the West, in quotation marks, you would say, or at least people who live in cities and things like that, struggle to do and seem to be even more isolated than ever?
I think one factor has to do about your culture in terms of whether you're living in an individualistic culture or not. So in the West, we tend to be living in this individualistic, I am my own person, I do my own thing, I look after myself, hence I'm on my device in order to be connected with the world. If you're living in cultures where it's more collectivistic, where we all work together for a common goal, we help each other, we work together, we, especially about instrumental support, helping each other thrive, then there is that connection there. And you're not feeling alone. You're not feeling lonely. And because you're not feeling lonely, you're less likely to be depressed. And so that helps, having a good mental health and physical health to increase your lifespan for sure. So I think that it's how they live their lives for sure, being connected with other people, not only for emotional support, but for fun times, to laugh. And, humor is important for our health. So it's that sort of thing. And also to get help. In a lot of these cultures, the parents, there's 3 generations living in the same household. And that's very uncommon in the West. It's very uncommon now. It's more like we have nuclear families here. And so when there's more people in the household, like generations, there's younger people appreciating the older generation and the older generation feeling that they have productivity, that they are doing something to help, even though they may not be working in the workplace any longer. So it helps all family members. I think that's a big factor. Not the only one, but it's certainly a big factor.
Of course, yeah. I know it would be a multitude of factors, but do you think that individualistic culture could potentially be a key part of what's damaging this current generation's mental health and their self-image, and that comparison to other people, how they see themselves as their own person, they're constantly comparing themselves to other individuals, might be leading to that rise in mental health issues?
Well, I don't know if I would classify it purely in terms of living within an individualistic culture. I mean, there are perks to, being on your own, living on your own. You're really able to manage yourself without needing other people. And that can have its advantages. I mean, take, for example, the recent coronavirus pandemic. Us living on our own anyway made it so that, yes, it was not helpful and it was annoying and it was irritating to actually be alone all the time, but we were probably able to manage it because most of us did live on our own. And so I'm not sure that in itself is an issue, but what is the issue is we do tend to do things on our own. We study on our own. We can actually study from home. We can actually work from home. We don't have to connect with other people because it's so convenient to stay at home. I mean, we can shop from home. So we can do so many things and not rely on others. And then we're in a society where at the workplace, we're told to move up the ladder and to do that alone, not to be loyal to any one group or organization, but to try to work our way up. So we are learning to do things on our own. So it does make sense that we use the device as a way to get connected. But like I said earlier, the downfall is that we do increase the odds that we will become more lonely. And loneliness is what's connected to depressed affect. And that can really be, that can really hurt. That can really not only affect the quality of one's life, but make it so that for some people, they might be susceptible to ending their life. So it can have serious consequences if we're left alone too much and do not feel like we're supported by our group. I mean, we are social animals. So for the most part, we do like to be connected. Even if we're introverted, we like to be connected.
Absolutely. I would say, just to close off, what kind of practical ideas would you suggest people take from these blue zone principles, shall we say, that we can emulate in our own lifestyles and practice more similar to these people?
Well, I have one that I want to share, and I think it's a great idea. Again, I got this idea from my partner who, has some wonderful ideas about how to live successfully into old age. And one is, as we start to age, we start to change the way we're living our lives. We might not necessarily need to be in a downtown core where there's a lot of hustle and bustle. We might not be in a big city. We might be in a smaller area. What we need to be mindful of is, how do we stay connected with the world, even if, let's say, we're retired and we're not working anymore, or we don't want to be driving around a lot anymore. And so living in an environment, or being immersed in an environment where you can walk, you can meet up with people, you can see people en route to walking to the grocery store, getting your groceries, hop on a bike and go for a little ride, find an area to live where there's natural landscapes, where there's people who are appreciating those landscapes. Those are all positive things that boost our mental health and allows us to live a good quality life. So I think if people start thinking about their future that way, where do I want to be, let's say 10 years from now, 20 years from now, in terms of my living, and kind of being in a community that resembles a little bit more what we're seeing in the blue zones, where people are more apt to get out there and connect. And that includes things like going to venues like a town's festival, or whatever they have going on, like a farmer's market or things like that. So I give that as a good example of thinking ahead in terms of how you can increase your chances of staying connected with other people physically and enjoying the landscapes at the same time.
Sybil, you've been an incredible guest and had some really amazing insights. If people want to read more of your stuff, where should they look to find you?
Well, first off, if you do a Google search, you'll under my name, Sybil Geldart, you will notice that I am a practicing clinical psychologist in Ontario, Canada. And so you'll be able to find my information there and my email address. I am also Associate Professor of Psychology at Wilfrid Laurier University in Ontario, Canada. So that's another way to reach out. And if you really are interested in some of the strategies or practical tips, that some of which I've talked about today, please go ahead and read my new self-help book, Alone Time: Embracing Solitude for Health and Well-Being. I think it's a great book, and I think it helps a lot of people, you and me both, in terms of how to live a more fulfilling life in a changing world that we're in right now.
Thank you very much for coming on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.